worship your holy name. Maybe
I love that. You sometimes hear noises in here and lots of little kids, and we have our own kids, even preachers' kids and grandkids and great-grandkids and neighborhood kids and friends' kids and sometimes foster kids and sometimes strangers' kids, never seen them before. And I hope that doesn't bother you because it doesn't bother us here. It's nice to have them all go down there. Doesn't mean all the noises are silenced now, but muffled maybe. But we love kids here, and if you've ever been in a church that has just old people and no kids, they will have a longing to hear those things that sometimes bother us. And anytime you hear a noise from a kid, just know that's future faithfulness in the kingdom. Just remember that. A couple of you have asked me about this Davis that I keep quoting, and his full name is Dale Ralph Davis. Joe lent me the book, and I've been using it. It's a good one, and I want to give credit where credit is due. So you can go look it up. You can read it for yourself. A lot of good material. We got through 3 chapters of Joshua last Sunday. We'll hurry through a couple more today before we slow down near the end of the book. If you've been reading through this along with us, then you've probably noticed that Gilgal, the city of Gilgal, has been a significant place for the Israelites up to this point. It's where they camped. It's where they held some maybe military headquarter talk, and it became their decision location and home base until they were more settled. It really became their temporary home headquarters until they all had a home to go to. But you may notice now that you come to chapters 18 and 19 that another city is about to become center stage. It will now be the meeting place for Israel, especially the holy site, since the traveling tabernacle will make its permanent home there for a while. It's called Shiloh, and it's about 30 miles north of Jerusalem, and you'll get to know it if you pay attention. This is where the tabernacle or the tent of God will remain until King David would move it to the ark to Jerusalem, and his son Solomon would build the permanent structure, the temple, to house it. For now, God would make his home in Shiloh. It's where the Israelites would bring their offerings, and that's where they would make their sacrifices, and that's where they would do their worshiping, Shiloh. And it's a good place now to stop and remember what God had told Israel, even before they came here, about the dangers of idolatry, the thing to do to the places of pagan worship, and their calling to worship him and only him. This back in Deuteronomy 12. Even before the Israelites stepped foot into Canaan, God had already been frank with them and told them what must happen when they entered the land. Listen to God's warning back here, Deuteronomy 12. This is while Moses was still alive. These are the decrees and laws you must be careful to follow in the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given you to possess as long as you live in the land. Destroy completely all the places on the high mountains, on the hills, and under every spreading tree, where the nation you are dispossessing worship their gods. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, burn their Asherah poles in the fire, cut down the idols of their gods, and wipe out their names from those places. You must not worship the Lord your God in their ways, but you are to seek the place the Lord your God will choose from among all the tribes to put his name there for his dwelling. To that place you must go. There bring your burnt offerings and sacrifices, your tithes and special gifts, what you have vowed to give, and your free will offerings, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks. There, in the presence of the Lord your God, you and your family shall eat and shall rejoice in everything you put your hand to, because the Lord your God has blessed you. God was a jealous God, and he has a right to be jealous. The other so-called gods are not gods at all. They're fake. They're false. They're useless. They're helpless. They're dumb. That is absolutely the truth, and it is still the truth today. God doesn't play well with rivals. He never has, because there are no real rivals. And he expects loyalty from his people since he has been nothing but loyal and faithful to them. So back then, when they're looking ahead to going into Canaan, the land of promise, God told them what they do and don't do. When you get there, do this, don't do this. Don't tolerate the false gods, not the idol shrines, not their pagan places of worship. Tear them down, destroy them, burn them, let them be no more. And then seek the one place I'll show you. I will choose that place. That place among the tribes will be the one place where my name will be honored, he says. That's where he will dwell among his people. That's the place where they would worship. Why? Because the Lord your God has blessed you. I hope that's why you're here today. Not this place. I mean, what we're doing here. I'm not sure why you've come, but I hope it's because you have been blessed by God. And I know some of you are in some hard places right now, and you are facing some scary things. What happens here around us in our country, overseas, it's enough to bring you to the brink of worry. But even there, especially here, I hope you are convinced that we should do this with great joy and exuberance because he has blessed us in big ways, and he expects us to revere him and him only, and he invites us to himself in order to worship. And I hope you have done that today. Today, the place doesn't matter. Just so you know, worship happens anywhere and happens everywhere when God's people choose to worship. Jesus was talking to a Samaritan woman on a hot day in John 4 and said, the time is coming and has already come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit. And since he is spirit, his worshipers must worship in spirit and truth. Shiloh doesn't matter today. Shiloh does not matter. Jerusalem does not matter. This church building does not matter. No place matters because every place can be a holy place. Every lover of the Lord, every disciple of Jesus who has been bought with precious blood, united in death, burial, and resurrection, everyone who is in Christ and filled with the Spirit, he or she who is owned by the Lord and transformed by the Lord and saved by the Lord is right now, right here, and right there, everywhere. A temple of the Holy Spirit, a place for worship. He who is his, she who is his, we who are his, worship anywhere, everywhere, anytime, with anyone, and even with no one around. It's just how we are. We are worshipers. It's what we were created to be. I hope you don't leave this worship today, because sometimes we think of it as here. Don't leave it here. Pick it up. Walk with it. Go with it. Take it with you wherever you go. You worship the Lord everywhere and anywhere and all the time with anyone and no one. Worship him with every step and with every breath you take. Now back to the tribes. They're getting their land as the lots are being cast and the Lord is directing them. The land of Canaan divided into all these tribes of Israel. And by the time you get to these chapters, I think we're bored. I told you that last week. I think that's honest. We're bored by it. If you get to this in your daily Bible reading, you might be tempted to speed through it because it doesn't matter anyway. Dividing the land between the tribes, really? All this ink on the page, why? What does it matter? Well, I agree with you. It's a little boring if you're not invested in it. I've never experienced this, but let me just guess something. If you've ever experienced it, then you would know. I would think it's quite boring to sit and listen to an official reading aloud a will, an executor of the will speaking words on a page about blah, 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 who gets what. Who cares? Who cares? Unless you're the family and your name is in the will, and you discover in that reading that you have become a very rich person. I would think it wouldn't be boring at all if you were able to finally figure out this inheritance, it's yours. It's your land now. It's your property. It's your house. It's your treasure. It's your money. You are rich. I would think you would be now interested in the details of what was said. And while we're thinking of it, I'm guessing you wouldn't be interested at all if I invited you later today to drive somewhere outside of town to a random piece of property out in the woods and come with me. Let's go walk it together. Let's spend the afternoon, you and me, walking over every piece, every inch of the ground, looking at the lay of the land. stepping off the boundaries, seeing where the lines are, the tree line, the field over yonder. That's what we say here, over yonder, the creek or creek, and all the way up the hill to the other side. I would think you would say, thank you, no thank you, I'm out. Totally boring. Unless I said, I'm giving it to you. It's big. It's expensive. It's yours. Now, would you take me up on my offer? Would you go with me and walk with me every inch of that land, just seeing how far your property goes, where it winds through the trees, across the creek to the other side, and all of it is yours? I'm thinking we're bored by this, to be honest, but I get the feeling Israel would have hung on every word and noticed every landmark, every line to know this is where I will raise my family and this is where I will grow old and die. I've told you the larger campaign of conquest is over. Still some places and cities to be conquered. Joshua and the people of Israel are casting lots. God is dividing the land and giving it to the people. But 5 tribes already blessed with allotment, 7 still left. Why? By the time you get to these chapters, why? The words in chapter 18, how long will you wait, Joshua says. How long will you wait before you begin to take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given you? Are they lazy? Are they dragging their feet? Are they not wanting to fight and drive the Canaanites out anymore? I don't know, maybe. Joshua gives a new plan, 7 tribes, pick 3 men each, 21 total, go out and survey the land. Come back with great notes and then we'll divide it. The lots will be cast, they will determine by the Lord's hand what will happen and who will get what. And you may notice every time it talks about lots, we are confused. Casting lots is interesting, I think. Have you noticed in the scriptures how often God uses lots to determine his will? It's crazy, I think. I'm not going to study it with you. You can go do it. It's an interesting study, but interesting, yes, right. Davis points out these lots were necessary, he would say. So somebody can't say, well, that's not fair. Well, that ain't right. No, this is the will of God. It's not by luck. It's the Lord's hand who does this. Maybe we can't explain it. We just have to trust it like they did. God is behind it. It will not be an issue. It must not be an issue what God has determined. Now, another interesting note. If you remember what we read last week, Joseph's sons' tribes started complaining. Do you remember that? They complained they didn't have enough land. Interesting, because Judah has so much land, he shares it with Simeon. And while Joseph's sons' tribes are also unwilling to fight to expand their allotment, when the land is given to Dan, Dan's tribe quickly expands their territory, increasing their holdings. Interesting, isn't it? In any one given family, even among your own flesh and blood, it makes you wonder sometimes why he is like that and she is like that. You know their parents. You are their parents, and you still say, why are my kids so different? I don't know, but they are. How they're wired, how they work, how they see life, and what they get to work in. Interesting. And back to the laziness to take the land, Davis says, Yahweh's promised the land, yet it must be possessed. It's Yahweh's gift, and yet that does not cancel human responsibility. Yahweh's promises are intended not as a sedative, but as a stimulant. God doesn't want us to swallow his promises, but seize them. And then maybe you're familiar with 2 Peter 1, because the author goes there and says, remember that? How Peter writes, the divine power God has granted to us, everything pertaining to life and godliness, he gave it to you. And then goes on to say, yeah, and for this reason, make sure you apply this with all diligence and add to this. Add these things to your life. And the author goes on to say, God's gifts are not meant to tame, but to arouse God's people. So, it may be a deep thought, but there is a relationship between God's grace and our response. God's gift that is always free, and yet our willingness to work, not to earn it, but in gratitude for it. Finally, after all the tribes got their inheritance from the Lord, the great leader, Joshua, finally took his too. And this is how chapter 19 ends, starting in 49. When they'd finished dividing the land into its allotted portions, the Israelites gave Joshua, son of Nun, an inheritance among them, as the Lord had commanded. They gave him the town he asked for, Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim, and he built up the town and settled there. And these are the territories that Eleazar the priest, Joshua son of Nun, and the heads of the tribal clans of Israel assigned by lot at Shiloh in the presence of the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And so they finished dividing the land. I think that probably shows great leadership for Joshua to make sure everybody else is cared for. You all have what you needed, right? Everybody good. Now it's my turn. And at the end of the day, at the end of the process, Joshua, truly a great leader, now takes his land that God had promised him. This great leader is now an old man, his twilight years, and he is taking hold of what God promised him. Now he can rest there. And he has some more time. He's not quite done yet. He's going to enjoy this gift for a while. And we're not done. There's still some more that he's going to do, and really some more he's going to say. And he'll continually push his own people to make sure they follow their God, because he's the only God. But I was thinking about this section of Scripture while I was thinking about Veterans Day. And for these years, Joshua had been serving well and leading well and fighting well. Always following the Lord. Wherever God sent him, he went, doing his duty. And now this old soldier is going home. Not that he's really been there, it's the one that's been promised him, and he'll enjoy his last years there. I'm sure I'll never understand what some of you know very well, and that's what it's like to serve in that respect. What it's like to be a soldier, to serve or even to fight. Some of you know that world because that's been yours experience. And while I may not understand it, I honestly try to appreciate it. And I'm grateful to those folks, some of you who have served well and done it with dignity, doing duty above all. I don't know if you've heard this song. It's a good one. Released in 2003, sung by Toby Keith. I'm just trying to be a father, raise a daughter and a son, be a lover to their mother, everything to everyone. Up and at 'em bright and early, I'm all business in my suit. Yeah, I'm dressed up for success from my head down to my boots. I don't do it for the money. There's bills that I can't pay. I don't do it for the glory. I'll just do it anyway. Providing for our futures, my responsibility. Yeah, I'm real good under pressure, being all that I can be. And I can't call in sick on Mondays when the weekend's been too strong. I just work straight through the holidays and sometimes all night long. You can bet that I stand ready when the wolf growls at the door. Hey, I'm solid. Hey, I'm steady. Hey, I'm true down to the core. And I will always do my duty, no matter what the price. I've counted up the cost. I know the sacrifice. I don't want to die for you, but if dying's asked of me, I'll bear that cross with honor, because freedom don't come free. I'm an American soldier, an American. Beside my brothers and my sisters, I'll proudly take a stand. When liberty's in jeopardy, I'll always do what's right. I'm out there on the front lines, so sleep in peace tonight. I'm an American soldier. I'm an American soldier. General Douglas MacArthur was an American soldier. He was a soldier and a leader of soldiers. If you don't know him, you can Google it. You can get on the internet and do all kinds of study. You can spend some time finding out all about his accomplishments and his honors, his military campaigns and the wars he fought in. Many loved him. Some hated him, but his soldiers followed him. And all of us owe a debt of gratitude, whether we know it or not, for what he did during World War II, giving us victory in the Pacific, which led to victory in that war and peace in the world for a time. But it was April 19th, 1951. MacArthur, as an older man, stood up before Congress to give a somewhat farewell address. And he was interrupted some 50 times because they loved it, their ovations, because he had become quite a hero to the American people. And this is how he ended that speech that day. I'm closing my 52 years of military service. When I joined the Army, even before the turn of the century, it was the fulfillment of all my boyish hopes and dreams. The world has turned over many times since I took the oath on the plain at West Point, and the hopes and dreams have long since vanished. But I still remember the refrain of one of the most popular barrack ballads of the day, which proclaimed most proudly that old soldiers never die, they just fade away. And like the old soldier of that ballad, I now close my military career and just fade away. An old soldier who tried to do his duty as God gave him the light to see that duty goodbye. MacArthur wasn't done, if you know. He wasn't hanging up everything. He just hung up his weapons and his leadership and took a new role in his retirement as he got to go around and speak and try to be a diplomat in some ways. And he died April 1964, but I think always a soldier in his heart to his death. I wonder what it was like for Joshua, the old soldier, who's now hanging the sword up in some ways to inherit a new land and start a new life in this land. He wasn't done living, but it was his twilight years, and he started doing different work now. He got to the place he wanted, the city he wanted, as God had promised he'd have it. And after all the destruction that he had brought onto the land at God's bidding, now his first order of business, if you remember what it said, is to start building. And so he starts building right there so he could settle down right there, and that's where he would live his last days. Must have been nice to enjoy some peace after all the war. I'll bet he never forgot the battles. I'll bet he could still name them and how many died and what they won. I bet he remembered all the men who fought with him, the blood that flowed from friend and enemy. Because I get the feeling and I hear the stories that soldiers don't forget those things. And some are honored by those memories and some are haunted by them. But like MacArthur, who would fade into history, I'll bet Joshua would someday die quietly in his own land, as we'll read later. But I'm guessing still a soldier at heart. We're not to his death yet. We're inching closer with each chapter. We're almost there. He's got a little more living to do and a little more to say to his people, and we'll pick it up there next time. So let me just close with this. Once again, you may see some of this stuff in these chapters as really insignificant, boring, you might say. But please see the significant parts of the stuff too. David says in these verses, there's no uselessness here. This is not a useless tailpiece. Though the notes are not visible in the text, even these few verses that we just read, it's really music, he says. It's music. Simply, great is thy faithfulness, if you know the song, but in a different key. It's a standing witness to the fact that the majority may be neither faithful nor right. It's a witness to the fact that Yahweh keeps his promises, even if he must preserve two faithful men from Anakim, chariots, and high water to do it. So, do you know the faithfulness of God? It is being repeated over and over and over again in different words, in different language, through Joshua's days and from the beginning of the text to the end of the scriptures. God is Jehovah. Jehovah is God and God alone. He is faithful. He is good. He is gracious. He is forgiving. But he will only save those who are his, who are bought with the precious blood of his son, Jesus. Are you his? Let's stand and sing. Come if you need to.
There's not a friend like the Lord.